Every time I hear someone say something like, well, I'm only toxic when other people are toxic first, I think to myself, you just admitted to being a toxic person. Now, sometimes you will get lucky with people that are not toxic and they won't trigger you with something they say. Or perhaps you are interacting with someone who is anti-toxic and you appreciate that you are not toxic when you are around them. But the person that is toxic without cause is extremely rare and usually has to do with hormonal imbalances, either situationally or due to chronic health issues. Which means that the vast majority of people that are toxic are the ones reacting to others being toxic. Now, how is this possible, you might say? If most toxic people are doing it out of a reaction, then who is starting it? The answer is often complicated to identify at the time, but it is very simple to state. The simple explanation is that 99% of all toxicity comes from what I call escalating miscommunication. Person A does something in a game that seems a little strange. It's too small to talk about, but it gives person B a weird impression. Then, at that moment or a little bit later, person B says or type something that does not seem mean to them, but it does convey their distrust in person A. Which you might say, why should they trust person A? They don't know them. The problem here, though, is that not trusting someone is often slightly offensive to that person. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. Think about it. It doesn't feel good to be viewed poorly, and not being trustworthy is being viewed poorly. So person A quips back with something short and curt, affirming the narrative that we are not friends and that we have no interest in being friends. This is by its very nature aggressive, and what proceeds from this point is that both person A and person B are assuming the worst of what the other person is saying and assuming the best of what they are saying, which allows each response to the other to feel to them as appropriate while feeling to the other person as over the top, thus continuing to escalate until it's out of control. This is why I call it escalating miscommunication. Neither player is truly understanding what the other player is feeling or thinking. Non-toxic players are a little bit more complicated. Some are just non-confrontational. This is not healthy in real life, but it serves them pretty well in the virtual context because they get to avoid this escalation process. Other players that seem non-toxic gravitate towards passive aggression. These players will eventually become very toxic with their teammates, but rarely become toxic with random encounters. The healthiest form of non-toxic players are those that assume the best of others and of themselves. These players usually say nice things to other players and assume other players like them in times that they're not sure. If you are in this place, you are doing really well. You are probably older and have learned that assuming the best of others is more effective, or you have a lot of nice people in your life and that culture has rubbed off on you. And then the last group are those that are anti-toxic, which requires assuming the best of others and themselves while simultaneously assuming the worst of their joint efforts towards communication. When a situation starts to escalate, an anti-toxic person generally reflects on what they have said in the most negative light possible to see how it could have come across poorly to the person that is now being mean to them. They usually then respond, I'm so sorry I said that. That is not what I meant to communicate. Even if the way they communicated was actually a decent way to communicate and the other person was assuming the worst of them, they are apologizing for the impact that they had on that other person. This requires a person to be incredibly secure in themselves while simultaneously caring a lot for others and wanting the best for them regardless of how they act. I've spent the last 20 years of my life trying to be this kind of person, and I'm still so bad at doing this. But in the times that I succeed, it is incredibly rewarding. And some of my best friends now are people that were previously a jerk to me. Now, to clarify, I am not talking about a nice person that always gets walked on. I'm talking about a secure person that values truth, but is willing to spend a lot of their effort to think about things through another person's point of view. When this is done well, it will not be viewed as weak, but rather you will have a strength and a security about you that is very intriguing to others. This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from my all-time hero. I've literally based my entire life around trying to be like this guy. He talks in riddles a little bit, but they are so brilliant. So one of his quotes is, "Be wise as serpents and as innocent as doves." And I love that quote because he takes two things that seem contradictory and he says to become the best of both of them. And like I said, I still suck at it, but it is incredibly rewarding. So right now, I'm the #1 YouTuber for Frostborn, which is a new thing for me. Well, I mean, I might have been #1 for Last Day on Earth with at one point, but I didn't really understand YouTube back then, and I started covering other games and didn't really realize what I had. But that's all behind me now. Right now, JCF is the #1 YouTuber for Frostborn, and I think Frostborn is going to explode, especially now that the devs have made pretty much every change that we have asked for. So I want to do something with you guys to make it even better. I want us to try to create a culture within our game of being the least toxic game in the world while it's small and easier to do, so that when it gets big, people joining the game will see it and say, wow, why is this game so different? Now, Frostborn already has a lot of nice players. When I did my video on the toughest survivor in Frostborn, several people messaged me in tears after watching it. It touched their heart and they felt for Jacob. You guys are a bunch of softies and I love it. But I think if we are intentional about making Frostborn the least toxic gaming community in the world, we can do even better. Because just like being toxic is contagious, so is being nice to each other. So if we're intentional about it, we can get a snowball going so that it can make the game more enjoyable for everyone. But before I get into what I think we should do, let me mention 2 things that I don't think we should do. The first one is that we should not hold back in PvP. Frostborn is not a game where everyone is a winner. If you beat someone down, then I hope you roar in celebration because you did it. You beat them, and that feels good. But for the love of everything that is good, please don't call them a noob afterwards. You realize that you are insulting yourself, right? You are essentially saying, you must be a noob because I was able to beat you. You are insulting yourself. And then if they beat you next time around, that just makes it worse. So just say good game and move on. And if you want to be anti-toxic, you could even point out how they had a disadvantage in some way. Even if you had several disadvantages of your own, you don't have to mention those. You know what those disadvantages were, and you can just beat them down again next time if they get cocky. The second thing that you should not do is not take people's stuff. If you beat someone or if you raid someone, take their stuff. It's part of the game. You earned it. I know that some of you guys see that I'm often giving people more stuff than I take from them in my pay to win series, and that's because it's a pay to win series. And if you want to do that, go for it. It makes people really like you, but taking people's stuff is not toxic. Do it. It's part of the game. In all of my other series, if I beat someone in a random setting, I love taking their stuff. It's part of the game and it's amazing. Okay, so with those 2 qualifiers of things that you should still keep doing, here are some of the things that I think we should be proactively doing to make Frostborn the least toxic gaming community in the world. I already mentioned saying good game, and it is a great example because it is commonly used by non-toxic players. It implies that they played well and that you played well. It was a good game. If you want to go even more than this, then try to get in the habit of complimenting others. Say something like, man, that was a great way of using that door to your advantage. Now, if you just beat them down, make sure not to say something that might seem sarcastic, but if you are a good player, you should be able to find things they did well. And then I said that you should take people's stuff, and I meant that, but personally, I recommend not taking stuff you don't need. If you've got 50 plus offerings to Odin, then maybe don't take that guy's last offering to Odin. I know it's not that hard to get, but it's kind of annoying when you want to go to Odin's and you realize that you have to go get an offering first. Same thing with the rings of the Tomb of Ash. If you have over 10 of each, maybe you don't need any more. But more importantly than that, if there are mistakes that the devs made, then don't take it out on the player. For example, if the matchmaking system that the devs set up that isn't that great right now matches you with someone that, man, you can just totally clean them out, maybe don't zero them out. I realize that you're frustrated about the matchmaking system and that somehow you think, oh, if I really beat this guy down, then they'll go complain to the devs and then there will be actual change. And that is partially true, but for every player that goes and complains to the devs, there's going to be 9 more that just quit the game and never come back. Now, some people can get a rush from zeroing someone out. They just feel so powerful just wiping someone out. But it's not actually that you're that good. It's just that the devs set up a poor match. And really what it boils down to is there might be a 6-year-old kid on the other end of that phone and you're over here like, oh, look how powerful I am. But if you knew what was actually happening, you would be embarrassed because you're getting all this like self-worth out of beating up on a kid. I also recommend giving players tips at the end of the raid like, hey, you had 300 planks in your chest and a bunch of level 1 walls. I suggest upgrading your walls so that your planks won't get stolen and those walls would help protect your other stuff as well. Now, don't do this to advanced players, players because you're just going to insult them, giving them advice that they already know. Even advanced players make mistakes. They think, oh, this isn't going to happen to me, and so don't insult them with your advice. But new players usually receive it well, especially if you give a stack or two of planks back as a goodwill gesture. You still took most of them, but it was a nice gesture. And then lastly, just make friends. Now that most of the zones are forced non-aggressive, just be nice to people. Help them clear out a zone or kill a boss. Now don't be naive and let them steal the boss's loot. And a lot of people will want to bring a bunch of giants over to try to kill you. Remember to be as clever as a serpent, but you can still be nice to people and not get taken advantage of. There might be some things that go wrong, but just brush it off and try not to let it happen again. The secret to doing all of this is genuinely caring about those people. That person is a lot like you. They have good moments, they have bad moments. Sometimes they're casual, sometimes they're hardcore, sometimes they're smart, and sometimes they do dumb things. And in addition to that, this person plays Frostborn, which right now has less than 5 million players, which is less than 0.04% of this world. That will probably change in the future, but right now we are a relatively small community. If this game means a lot to you, then statistically speaking, there's a higher chance that you would want to be friends with that person that you are interacting with in the game than one of 20 people that you walk by on the street. So let's make Frostborn the least toxic gaming community in the world. I know that's a huge thing to shoot for because almost every gaming community turns toxic, especially when they get big, but I think we have several things going for us that might make it possible for us to do this. First, the devs have been listening to us. Sometimes they take a little while, but they have made almost every change that we have requested. Frostborn is the least pay to win it has ever been since global. It has some of the most dynamic multiplayer in mobile gaming, and the plans the devs have for the future are incredibly exciting. So this is a huge advantage for us making Frostborn the least toxic gaming community in the world, because when the devs don't listen to players, games often become more predisposed to becoming toxic, which we kind of experienced a couple updates ago. So here's my last idea. In addition to doing all of the things that I mentioned earlier, when you do them, add the hashtag FBLOVE or Frostborn Love. I know that there are better hashtags out there, but sadly they're just too long. I put a lot of thought into this, and I think we just need something simple. So hashtag Frostborn Love or FBLOVE is our best bet, because even though it is simple, it still conveys our intention as a community to not be toxic. If enough of us do this, then people will probably catch on and pay it forward. Don't tell them where it started or anything about this channel, because that's not the point of this. The point of this is to start a culture within our game. And if you don't want to use the hashtag, don't use the hashtag. Just being nice to people in the ways that I was talking about or other ways that you can think of is all you need to help in this. If enough of us do this, it will set the tone of the game. Well, that's it, guys. My team and I are going to keep doing this as we play Frostborn, and I hope you guys join us making Frostborn the least toxic gaming community in the world. All right, guys. I'll see you next time.